Thanks so much, Clint. Wonderful to be here and to be facilitating such a fantastic panel. At Future Leadership, we are certainly seeing the velocity of change escalate, supporting the 2023 Pulse Change Index findings by Accenture. And this is a significant trend whereby the way in which we lead and adapt at the pace of the disruption happening in our operating environment really needs to change. There's this growing tension that is being felt by leaders every day to work with technology, to produce more, and to adapt to new ways of working at scale. To do these things, we certainly think requires something different than just the current capabilities and skills that our workforces possess. We're often seeing that while we implement lots of change programs around digital transformation, systems change, or workforce restructuring, we need to hold space to revisit our expectations of leadership capability to match these new environmental realities. So to support our clients and partners with this challenge, we have created the Future Leadership Capability Framework, which was based on 25 years of international research findings that defines the requisite capabilities, personal attributes, emotions, and leadership mindsets to prepare leaders for the demands of workforces today and tomorrow. We really use this framework to help define what high performance looks like within organisations, to help them define a new future state, and we can map those capabilities to current workforce reality to support with those shifts. Our recently released Future Leadership and Capability White Paper brought together interviews and surveys that we conducted with over 300 Australian C-suite leaders. And that really revealed at a high level the future and human capabilities that we really need to lean into and to think about cultivating to lead effectively in a hybrid world and to also connect with an intergenerational workforce. Some of the findings highlighted the strong demand for leaders to possess not only a vision for the future, but very much an enterprise-first mindset. The depths of commercial acumen and interpersonal acumen are absolutely critical, and this ability to finesse and pivot and be agile in holding space for all of those competing demands that leaders have. We looked at the top suite of sought-after capabilities, and adaptability, innovative thinking, enterprise leadership were found to very much be priorities. So the urgency to cultivate these capabilities cannot be overstated. So when it comes to future capability, implementation can feel elusive. We very much come from the philosophy of combining evidence-based approaches with a pragmatic and practical roadmap to implement leadership, talent, and capability solutions so that the implementation of capability can be seamless and really connect in the flow of work. And that's really what we're going to be discussing today with our panel. We've been really fortunate to work with each of our panelists in different ways, shapes, and forms, and really pleased to be joined, as Clint shared, by Kate Breheny, Chief of Staff at Bupa, Amy Singe, General Manager People at Yarra Valley Water, Tim Drinkall, Head of Leadership and Organisation Development at Metro Trains. So first of all, a big thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the conversation, as Clint mentioned, everyone will have lots of questions, no doubt, around how we anticipate, attract and develop future capabilities. There is, just to reiterate, the link and passcode below the live stream. So please feel free to start popping your questions in as the dialogue unfolds. We really want this to be an interactive session, and the technology will enable the audience to vote on preferred questions so we can really target those most popular ones first. I'm going to start with asking our panel for some opening remarks before we go to our audience questions in about 15 to 20 minutes' time. So, Kate, I might start with you. We've seen the recent Productivity Commission's 5-year report identify that an adaptive and capable hybrid workforce will really be the linchpin and unlock competitive advantage in the not too distant future. What capabilities are most prized for Bupa's workforce, and how is the organisation investing in those to build those capabilities at scale?
Thanks, Marcele. It's a great question, and I think there are 3 key capabilities that really come to mind as being important today and absolutely critical for the future. And I'll outline these in a moment, but I think they're not capabilities that will surprise people, I don't think. They're things that we know of today. But what is going to differentiate an organisation and how successful they are in really getting that edge and that competitive advantage is how well they can start to cultivate them today and really embed them into their culture, so that when we are in this future where there is, the increasing pace of change and more hybrid arrangements, it's just an embedded part of how they operate and what they do. So those are the cultures and environments where they'll be better set up to face into those challenges. So as I mentioned, there are 3 kind of big capabilities that come to mind. The first one is the ability to really create clarity in vision and priorities. So as you can imagine, as the rate of change continues to grow and people are faced with increasing demands, more options put in front of them, changes in priorities as we learn and adapt to different things, it's going to be even more important that they have that real understanding of and connection to the vision of the organisation and what is most important for that organisation. When teams know that, it gives them more confidence to really work within those boundaries and know if that's where we're headed and that's the direction, I've got the flexibility to innovate locally and try new things and be bolder in some of my thinking, because I know that ultimately it's going to help us get to that vision and that direction we're headed in as well. And I think that becomes increasingly important in organisations like Bupa that are quite distributed, where we've got people in aged care homes, in dental practices, in head offices. You want that localised decision-making and that ability to really read and adapt to the customer needs at that point in time without moving away from the vision and priorities of the organisation. And finally, I think the other point to that is that it really helps people, when they know what that direction is, to say no to the distractions and the non-value add activities. And I know that's something that comes up with change. You can be pulled in a lot of different directions. So having that clarity just lets people kind of go, no, that's actually not a priority and that doesn't align with where we're headed. I think the second capability is really around talent development and engagement, and thinking really differently about this to how we have in the past, particularly in a hybrid environment and a hybrid world where we just don't have the same opportunities to have that visibility with our talent and think cross-functionally about talent, because you're seeing those people in and out every day, and also how we develop those people in new ways as well. And I think there's a few component parts of this that are really important. Thinking about how we measure performance differently. So how we just really focus in and get crystal clear on what the outcomes are that we're trying to achieve, not getting caught up in the outputs or the activities themselves. In addition, how to create more visibility across teams. So where teams might not necessarily be coming together on shared problems or work, but it's still important to be thinking, as you mentioned, Marcus, about that enterprise as a whole. So how you still create those connections and visibility cross-functionally, because they are really critical for performance ongoing. Also, when we think about developing talent, thinking differently about on-the-job learning, we've got a range of roles where, shadowing and observation is absolutely critical. So how we actually set that up differently, whether it is through a different mechanism or through how you create those opportunities for people to come together, is really key. And also something that we found when COVID hit and we did move to a hybrid environment, a real priority was how to equip leaders with the skills and information to have better quality conversations about wellbeing and mental health with their people. And that was absolutely critical, and I think will continue as well, where people are just, facing increasing amounts of change. We need leaders to have the ability to really pick up on those cues and have those open conversations about mental health and wellbeing to make sure that people are okay and that people have the support that they need. One final point on that, I think, is just around how we think about talent will change as well. And we're already seeing that, where general problem solving and that ability to work cross-functionally and outside your area of expertise is absolutely critical and valued. And where we're starting to, do more job swapping, where you have someone with a completely different background move into a new area, because it's that breadth of leadership and that strategic thinking that is going to enable leaders to better manage the change and anticipate and plan for the changes as well. And then the final capability that was on my mind with this question is just around connection and how critical connection will be as a capability going forward. And that we need to think about this in a really different way and what that looks like too. So for leaders, we talk a lot about, how do we empower and help leaders to create more connection before task? And this is just critical. Like, as people face into more and more changes and they're working more remotely and in different situations, it can become quite transactional in those interactions where you call, you jump straight onto the topic. So making sure that leaders really understand the importance of how they can be present, really mindful, and really have those check-in and connection points with people so it doesn't feel too transactional and work-focused. In terms of teams and how they create connection, that's also one we've been thinking a lot about lately at Bupa, and finding that, what's meaningful connection really differs between teams. As I said, we've got aged care teams who are connecting every day. So what connection looks like to them is very different to teams who are working fully remotely. And so we're really trying to empower leaders again on how to work out what flexibility and what connection looks like for you locally to make sure that it works for your team. And that's where, again, with flexible policies, that's going to be really key. So we're really conscious of not mandating, requirements to be in offices on certain days, and having flexibility and the ability to work remotely is kind of a core part of our EVP. But then how do we really balance that where you do have some operational roles, as I mentioned, that need that face-to-face connection and time to learn more rapidly as well. So just really empowering the leaders to know what tools they have available and how to think about that locally as well.
Yeah, wonderful insights. And it's really making me think around that whole idea of everything having intention. I think
Absolutely.
what we're certainly seeing is requirements for leaders to be so much more intentional and choiceful around what kind of work, for example, needs to be done flexibly versus what can be done in person. So it's that concept of flexing with purpose. Or if I'm going to be embarking on a strategy process, making sure that all of our decisions and our thinking aligns with values and purpose. So it really sits at the core, to your point earlier, around being that compass for decision making. I think almost gone are the days, perhaps because of time constraints, where we can almost sit with ambiguity. We sort of feel like we need to move to an outcome quickly, and perhaps intent and purpose can help us navigate that and give us that clarity. Thank you for kicking off the conversation, Kate. Tim, as the pace of change accelerates and with today's intergenerational workforce, certainly having different skills and motivators and definitions around what work means to them, what success looks like, what contribution looks like in the workforce. How is Metro Trains leading and building leadership capability differently?
Thanks, Mars. We take a very pragmatic view of capability development, and we have the infrastructure tools to be setting the expectation for all of our leaders. So we, like many businesses on the call at the moment, we have a capability framework, we have success profiles which outline and set the expectation for every role. We have all of the delivery options available to us, the full 70-20-10 suite of delivery options. But we take a very one-size-fits-one approach to leadership development because we have 5 generations working at the same workplace in the same job, whether it be train drivers or finance staff or marketing teams. We have multi-generational workforces in similar roles. And so we take that one-size-fits-one approach where here are the expectations for you in the role. Here are the people skills, the business skills, the leadership behaviours, and the knowledge you need to do your job to 100%. Now, our job as learning and OD professionals is to create a multiple offering with variety and a strong focus on that 70% on-job activity. We're finding more and more the in-classroom sessions are a great foundational piece for our leaders to pick up on key concepts, key ideas, key information to make their lives easier. And managing a hybrid workforce can often mean some enterprise-wide issues or concerns or problems raise their heads, similar to every leader in the same circumstance. The problems like building trust in my team when we're not all at the same location at the same time on the same day, building connection and networks within my team, and also cultivating the innovation and the outcomes rather than punch in, punch out, time clocking people as they present to work. So we set the framework and we have very much a macro to metro approach to it. So we say in businesses in Australia, similar problems are occurring and similar issues within teams are occurring. Even within the rail industry, it's still the similar kinds of building trust, building connectivity, fostering innovation, ensuring that people feel connected in their workplace and in their work team. Now, here at Metro, if you're a leader that needs development in these areas, here's the module for you. It's not an 8-module course. It's not a program. It's not a 12-month or 2-year leadership program. It is one size fits one, genuinely one size fits one. So if you look at your success profile and you need confident communication skills, or you need coaching and development people skills, or you need driving performance business skills, here's the course, here's when to get it. The second step is then to provide coaching and mentoring in a meaningful way that meets the motivators and the values and the beliefs of the leader at the time. And that's 70% on job. Let's have a look at demonstration of excellence by some of our key people leaders. Let's see what confident communication actually looks like. Now, how do I apply that to my workplace with my messages that I need to get through to my team? And that intergenerational topic or aspect, I'm at a stage of my career where I'm starting to see the bright sunny days and think, wouldn't it be nice to be out from the office? And my son, he's starting to apply for grad programs. And so for me, accumulation of holidays or extra leave or, some other forms of reward is what I'm seeking. What he's seeking is sustainability. I want to work for a company that's sustainable, that has a long-term view of the earth and everything else. Given my son's an absolute genius, to hear him say that, it was very eye-opening for me. In the workplace that we're in, we have plenty of grads within Metro. And so they think very differently about motives and values and how they want development. And so we tap into all of the data sources that we have available to us to make sure that we can deliver those multi-generational options for development. So it's not just one size fits all, it's that one size fits one.
Yeah, I love your insights. They're always, as you say, very practical and pragmatic. And it's right. It's one thing to build the assets that define what we need, the capability frameworks, the success profiles, the methodology to follow around living the capabilities and the leadership shifts. It's a very different thing to then embed in the flow of work, and also to ensure that we have a captive workforce who are really motivated to make those shifts. And hearing your reflections on where you're at in your journey relative to your son, it's a really important reminder of connecting with why we do work, what we want to get out of work, what are our values and how they shift at different points in our journey, and what that then means for our willingness to lean into the requirements from a work perspective and how work will actually get the best out of us. So they're great reflections. Thank you. I'll go to Amy now, and then we will open up for audience questions. So please send them through to Pigeonhole. Amy, what are your thoughts on the conversation thus far, and how might leadership capability need to change to ensure that your workforce at Yarra Valley has the right, perhaps, attitude to underpin the adoption or requirement for new skills being adopted for the future?
Look, I think echoing sort of the comments, particularly of Kate, but I think this concept of starting with some key mindsets. So this idea very much around the role of leaders is absolutely changing. And I think if we start with a really primary mindset that we hire good people and we trust them to manage themselves. Yes, we've got to put guardrails around, but if we start with that dominant mindset, then what is the role of a leader? I think it's very much changing. I think the complicated work, the A plus B plus C work, is more likely going to be done with automation and artificial intelligence, reconciling budgets, generating reports, doing all of that type of stuff that leaders still have to do. I think is fundamentally going to change, which then leaves space for the complex work, the messy work, the human work, the work that's done through dialogue. So I really, at Yarra Valley Water, to give people context, majority of our staff are knowledge workers. We've got about 850 staff. The key skill of leaders for us is very much that enterprise leadership and that ability to role model, but also cultivate good quality problem solving through really inclusive dialogue. Our award-winning hybrid approach, very much similar to Kate. There's no mandated days. There's local agreement making that we expect our leaders to cultivate between teams about how they want to set up those working norms, as well as sort of organisational moments that matter where people come in. But again, it's very much grounded in this sense of we lead with trust, and then 9 out of 10 times our people will reflect that back. So focusing on human needs that our people have, again, similar to Tim, multi-generational workforce, if you focus on those core human needs of a sense of purpose and belonging, that goes a long way. And then you can customise based on everybody's individual needs, but that gives you sort of a good foundation. I think the other things in terms of leadership is ruthless prioritisation. Everybody's suffering from, too much to do, shrinking resources, heavily competing priorities, working in a really complex system. How do I get the output as well as minimising the costs, as well as focusing on DEI and then making sure that, we've got psychological safety. So they're probably sort of some of the key things. We definitely focus on, when we hire leaders at Yarra Valley Water, we hire them for that primary leadership capability. We've got great internal mobility, and we really prioritise learning through the flow of work. We've just gone through a process where 3 of our executives have rotated into different positions, and that's happening further down the line as well. So it's actually giving people access on the job to be able to learn new skills in a safe environment of an organisation that they know, but it gives them a different mindset to understand a different point of view and work through. So I think that, to summarise, the role of leadership is going to be in that non-delegatable work. It's going to be creating the environment for really inclusive, complex dialogue, because that's where work happens. It's through dialogue, and being able to help people make sense of these complex worlds that we're in, and how to, really give them that guidance around prioritisation and, ultimately making an impact for our customers and at Yarra, our community and the natural environment.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's making me think of leaders really needing to hold space for both individual accountability, yes, but a lot more language around what are we doing to work through things, what are we doing to solve problems, what have we done historically that's worked well or less well, and really seeking to understand and inquire. I think of this role of leader as inquirer, and it's really wearing that hat. And in many ways, I think one of the best skills a leader can hone now is the ability to ask good questions, and really be in that discovery mindset so often of the time. We have some great questions coming through. I'm going to go to one of the most popular ones, and it really points to a desire for some practical examples. What are some successful examples that can be shared of programs or initiatives or things that your organisations are undertaking that are directly targeting this capability uplift that is required? Tim, I might go to you first, Mr. Pragmatic.
The solutions are already in my head. No, we pride ourselves on offering opportunities for that 70%. So as Amy and Kate have both alluded to, we do the role swaps, we do the secondments, role shadowing, acting up opportunities. We do similar to a grad program for some of our more specialist jobs where you can rotate around the specific areas of a technical role so that you pick up the technical knowledge that you need to do the job. But that comes firstly from a balanced viewpoint. In the rail industry especially, it's the value placed on leaders is typically what you know and your time in the industry, so your expertise. I've had 25 years in rail, therefore I am valuable to Metro or V-Line or anyone else. What we've started to balance with our executive team especially is valuing people and business skills as well as leadership behaviours over knowledge. And that comes through in our performance review conversations. It's a 50-50 balance now of what you actually deliver versus how you delivered it. So the behavioural element of performance. And it's also led by example. So our finance and commercial team recently undertook that role swap, exactly as Amy suggested. You know, our exec team are wanting to demonstrate excellence and showcase and prove that knowledge isn't the key, especially at the senior role level. It's how you lead a team versus what you know in terms of finance and commercial. So it was a very successful experiment. And what that led to was, right, so my leadership development, capability development plan looks different now compared to what it was, 12 months ago when I was in another role. So we're starting to see those capabilities come through into our leadership programs where people are highlighting different capabilities than what they had previously because they're having to delegate, they're having to rely on their experts in their team, not their own personal expertise. And it really does come through that mindset change for our senior leaders that the value is not necessarily in what you know. We can teach you what you need to know. What you bring as a leader is more important.
Yeah. And it's that classic, what gets measured gets done. So there's phase one, educate and redefine what the outcomes look like and redefine what value is, to your point, and what contribution looks like. And not go all on the leadership and no technical, but just rebalance the mix a little bit. Like any good change, ensure that it's role modelled from the top and have good executive sponsorship. That's critically important. And then start to get practical and live it. So whether it's redefining reward and recognition programs to reflect the different weighted criteria that might serve a particular outcome, living it, so the role swaps, the rotations, that we're rewarding leadership behaviour is absolutely critical. Amy, what about for you? Any thoughts on practical examples?
Yeah, I think really a practical example is we're creating leader labs. And so we're having a particular topic that we're understanding and sensing in our system is an emerging topic or a really gnarly topic for our leaders to work through. A great example that we've had recently over the last 6 months has been supporting people with mental health challenges. And as a leader, how do you actually do that? But when we're starting to build and design these, they're very short, they're very targeted, but we're spending a lot more time coming up with very real, practical case study examples for our leaders to work through, where we're not just segmenting a topic just with that lens. So in that example, what we got was really great feedback, because the case studies that we had was, how do you support an individual with mental health problems, as well as managing a team, as well as managing performance? And so nowadays, we had the benefit of having a very beautiful Aboriginal board member on our organisation, and he has said something that has stuck with me. And he said, Amy, everything is connected all of the time. So the way that we're designing our programs now is not this Western linear, put this in a box, it's all nice and neat and tidy. We're bringing these really gnarly issues to our leadership development programs for our leaders to help work through, recognising the way we might have dealt with it in the past is going to be different to the next one. We've all got this learner's mindset, because when we're dealing with messy human issues, they're never going to be the same. But giving people the space to work through those types of real live examples. So hopefully that's an example I can give for the audience. It's really practical, is where we're sort of looking at bite-sized, temporal programs with our leadership development.
Yeah, that's a great example, Amy, and it making me reflect on the intention that we have around the purpose of the program. So what are we bringing leaders together for in terms of very adaptive conversation and conversation only, versus what might be the learning events that we're seeking an outcome on, and progress on real work, or challenges that participants might work on in real time. And again, it's having a lot of intent behind the design of those initiatives, so that we can be giving people a chance to practice those skills again in the flow of work. Kate, what about for Bupa?
Yeah, great. A lot of the things that we've been implementing and thinking about have been mentioned by Tim and Amy, so I won't repeat those. One I will add, though, is we've been spending a lot of time trying to embed the idea of enterprise leadership with our senior leaders, and now looking at how we cascade that through the organisation. So again, thinking about what's going to be needed for the future, enterprise leadership, stuck out as something that is absolutely crucial, particularly with the changes in technology, changes in consumer demands, just changes in healthcare more broadly. It is getting more complex. And so the ability for us to be thinking more systemically and from the customer perspective, and linking those different services and propositions together, is going to create a real competitive advantage and benefit to health outcomes as well. And so we've been working with our most senior leaders on how to think about enterprise leadership in terms of how they embrace it and show up with that mindset and those capabilities each day. But then also really bringing a team together as a whole and going, all right, well, what does it look like for us in terms of how we interact? How are we going to problem solve differently? How are we going to make decisions differently? And as Amy mentioned, having really practical case studies and real business problems that we're trying to solve on the table, and using them to almost stress test the idea and how we bring that to life. One particular example of something we did with yourself, Marcele, was that observation workshop, which was just fantastic. So actually just almost the role play of, right, have a meeting, test these new behaviours and see how they show up, and then getting that real world life feedback in the moment to say, did you know this is what you did and this is what you didn't do? So I think anything that's very practical and in the moment is always really helpful. And when we're looking to cascade that now, really just trying to modularize it. So make sure that leaders are empowered. Again, they know their teams, what is going to work best for them. So we're giving everyone kind of the foundation of what is enterprise leadership and why is it important. But then based on your own team needs and where they're at, is it more important for you to be thinking about radical candor and how we have the right conversations? Is it more important that you're thinking about decision making, because we're not quite cracking that in terms of the data and the information we're bringing to the table? So again, it's really about the empowerment of leaders, given they know their teams, and just equipping them with the tools and having that consistent framework that it'll all hang off, but then giving them the tools to kind of pick and choose what's going to work best for them and their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the ability to critically appraise concepts like enterprise leadership, innovation, and actually form in some ways their own view of what that looks and feels like, because that will help cement the learning and enable people to connect to a construct versus it feel too theoretical and sort of on the shelf, if you like.
Yeah.
Another question's come through around whether Australia's lower rates of productivity are perhaps related to better work-life balance here in Australia. So, as we know, this concept of productivity has no doubt many precursors and things that shape those results and statistics that are reported. What are the panel's views on whether that's perhaps related to how we as Australians view and define work-life balance?
I'll go.
Amy, did you want to? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to be controversial and say I don't necessarily know. I think work-life balance is a great thing. I think a lot of the work that people are doing in whatever industry is cognitive work. It requires, active brain functioning. And we know from a health and well-being perspective, being rested, being able to care for yourself is actually going to be a crucial requirement of people to show up and do their best. Studies showed, over a certain amount of hours, like the work product that you produce is not as high quality as what it might be, earlier if you're working less hours. I actually think part of the issue around a lack of productivity is this concept of organisational debt. Organisations, the bureaucracy, the way that work gets done, the layers of approvals, the outdated systems, these types of things, the ways of working, I think these are the things that organisations need to start thinking about through the lens of technology advancements and automation, and actually looking at our employees as just as valuable customers that almost have a voice and a seat at the table, and designing work to make work easy for people to get those outcomes. And it's not easy, and we definitely don't have it solved. But this idea of people wading through organisational debt to get work done, I think is a more useful conversation to be able to have about where we're seeping, productivity loss. But I'm interested in what everybody else thinks. That's just my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. It's a challenging thing to do at scale, and then with the lens of risk and important good governance, particularly in sectors where that's absolutely paramount. Kate, do you have any views on that? And then I'll throw to Tim.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a challenge in the workforces that we've got. So you've got, a lot of people in kind of contact centre roles, dental clinics, aged care, where the flexibility, as I mentioned, for them is going to look very different to what it does in a head office. And so it's something that we've been trying to grapple with around how do we, again, empower teams at a local level to do what works for them, because it's absolutely becoming more and more of an expectation. And again, whilst it can't be the same practice fits for everybody, all teams need to have some sort of, benefit or element of work-life balance and flexibility offered to them now for it to be perceived as equitable across the organisation as well. I just think where organisations potentially fall over, or where it gets more complex, is where they try to mandate one particular practice or one particular solution, like, potentially a 9-day fortnight or, shorter hours on one day. Again, it doesn't really talk to that empowerment or of people to know what works best for them and what flexibility and work-life balance they need to be most productive. So again, it comes back to really making sure that the leaders know their people, the leaders know what works for them, the leaders are connected in and thinking about mental health and well-being and what that genuinely looks like, and what the indicators are where it might not be happening, and then have a range of tools at their disposal to be able to do. Because I do think it's important, it's here to stay, and it's only going to become more important. And it is an interesting link into how it's potentially supporting with greater productivity.
Yeah, and redefining outcomes can often then make us think, well, how are those outcomes best achieved? And let's get creative and novel in thinking about that and those inputs. Tim, comments from your end?
It's such a subjective question, isn't it? Australia has lower productivity than the rest of the world. Is that because of flexible work? It's a challenging question because, to be objective about it, if there's a lower productivity or a perceived lower productivity, what's the root cause analysis telling us? Is it because of, as Amy said, that bureaucracy and the layers to getting work through the pipeline? Is it because we have the wrong intent within our workforces? Is there an objective view to Lean, Six Sigma, requisite, something along those lines to give us better data points rather than an emotive response? The reason we've got lower productivity is because we've got more flexible work and a better work-life balance. Well, like Kate and Amy, our workforce is 2/3 customer facing, and they don't have the opportunity to have flexible work options, whereas the other third of us that do, it's almost becoming an entitlement to that third of the workforce. And as Kate mentioned, that's part of your EVP now, is to have flexible work options. But the data would need to stack up pretty heavily to say that because we've got flexible work options, our productivity is lower. Us from a pragmatic scientific point of view would say, prove it, show us. What's the data telling us? Is it a capability uplift? I'm not getting I'm not able to empower and motivate my team. That's causing the lower productivity. I'm not getting the engagement right within my team. Therefore, the discretionary effort is falling behind. So that's where the target lies, not necessarily in the way we work or where we work.
Yeah, it's definitely multifaceted and certainly complex. How do capabilities versus skills get differentiated in your minds and enable us to be ready for these emerging conditions? Tim, you mentioned earlier around the capability framework, success profiles. In your mind, what's the balance of capabilities versus skills? What does that look and feel like?
Yeah, for us, we've gathered best practice from around the world, Lominger competencies and human synergistics competencies, and you name it, we've had a look at it and dissected it, Hogan's, everything. And where we landed was a menu of capabilities is on offer. They include the subset of people skills, business skills, leadership behaviours, and knowledge. And so we've sort of sectioned our capabilities into those 4 distinct areas. Have we got it right? Probably not, but it's a step forward from where we were 5-10 years ago, where every single competency on the face of the earth was thrown into a capability framework and everyone's trying to hit everything.
Yeah.
We're just trying to narrow down what are the specific capabilities that are going to lead you forward in this enterprise, and how do you get them? So we really boil it down to making the complex simple and saying, what's the easiest and best low-hanging fruit that we can give that capability development to that leader at the right time when they want it, rather than force feeding our leaders, right, everyone's going to go through these 8 modules, whether you need them or not, whether you like it or not, this is what you're going to go through. So we turn the tables. We put career development, capability development back in our leaders' hands rather than in our hands, and forcing them to go on to programs. We prefer to have them pull down the learning at the time that suits them, in a way that suits them, and then we can drive it forward. But it all comes back to we see capabilities, we've got 40 of them, and they're 10, and it's just nice from a numbers perspective, 10 capabilities in each of those 4 quadrants.
Yeah, great. How are some of these capabilities being measured, and are the approaches that you're taking to measure these capabilities making a difference? Amy, I might throw to you on that one and then hear from Kate. The measurement of capabilities,
Yeah, we've sort of got a whole piece of work and sort of a project about rehauling those. We've got a capability framework. We've got a leadership capability framework. We are by no means there yet, but we're starting to think a lot more about skill-based hiring and looking at internal mobility through those lenses. Our measuring the sort of, the capabilities of the people that we have is probably more immature. What we're focused much more is around that sort of on-the-job providing those on-the-job learning experiences. And as Kate probably alluded to, helping to coach our leaders, overhauling our performance management frameworks to make sure we're focused much more on outputs.
Yes.
So deliverables, impacts, as opposed to, I've processed X widgets, or I've been in the office, X amount of time. So it's still evolving, and we're probably or would I say the maturity level of certain parts of that is probably quite immature in our business. We have benefited from having very low turnover. Yeah. So when we talk about business priorities and strategic priorities, we have probably been buffered from the need to really delve into that, but it is definitely something that we've got on the radar.
Yeah, great. And Kate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, again, we've got, similar to what Amy was saying, we've got some roles that are just so incredibly measurable in terms of outputs, and, the speed to answer the phone, the length of the phone call, all of that kind of is tracked. So there are some areas of our business that are, measuring performance and those capabilities is easier than others. But something we are trying to kind of shift the dial on for all is just around the regularity with which you are not only measuring performance, but taking that data and have a really meaningful conversation. So in some areas, we've got, specific performance coaches that are designed to take all of the component parts of the data and what we're seeing in the system and have really detailed coaching conversations with people to kind of help uplift their capability. That's obviously in some sections where you've got the data. In others where it's less measurable, again, it's working with the leaders to help them understand, well, how do you at the start of the year set those performance goals and really think about the on-the-job application and what it's going to look like, how you're going to measure success, how you're going to know it's successful. And rather than kind of dilute the conversation with every component part of the job, get leaders to focus in on, assuming that you're going to do your job and you're going to do a great job, what are the 1 to 2 differentiating capabilities that are going to make you even more successful, and how do we focus on measuring those? So it's always focusing on what's the stretch, what's the step up, rather than focusing all the conversation just on how your performance is going in the current role. So yeah, big part. Sorry, go.
No, are those performance coaches different from someone's line manager?
Yeah, so in some teams, yes. So they do. So some areas of the business have the performance coach, and then others, it is just the manager as well. So it's a bit of a combination. But yeah, where it's the manager, it's just the regularity of it and having the check-ins throughout the year, making sure that it's always timely feedback and trying to just really drive that ongoing cadence to measure and give people feedback so that they can adjust at that point in time.
Yeah, fabulous. So I might just have time for one more question before we wrap up. Quick whip around the panel. One capability that you're looking for in regards to generative AI. What capability comes to mind that really, I guess, underpins an ability to, I guess, lean into the use of generative AI and unlocks that mindset really and seeing value in those tools?
Oh, you go.
We're very much in our infancy with this. We've got sort of different, we've got a digital roadmap, and there's sort of generative AI sort of pocketed through sort of a couple of those things. But one of the broader enterprise capabilities I think that we are looking at is very much around documentation management, knowledge management, these types of things, understanding that if you're going to have a generative AI tool, then you need to actually have really good quality in terms of your data integrity. So that's more at sort of an enterprise level where we are by no means got it solved, but it's one of those areas that like hands wide open document management, you know, data integrity, these types of things always sits in that important but never urgent bucket. And we're starting to recognise absolutely as an enterprise level that that's going to be really critical for us in terms of being able to leverage these generative AI tools, because the quality of the data that you have sitting there is, you know, is going to be directly proportionate to the answers that you're going to be able to generate through those tools.
Very true. The input's so critical. Kate?
100%, yeah. Yeah, similar thoughts. We also, I think two things that come to mind around it is it's got to be business-led in terms of what's going to drive value. So you see lots of really cool and exciting use cases, but it's got to come back to how is it going to improve health outcomes for members, better customer experiences. Like, it's really got to be tightly aligned to that. Otherwise, I think organisations end up doing a lot of great stuff, but it's not necessarily having the impact intended. And in parallel, the ethics of it, how to, you know, particularly given we're in the healthcare space, how to make sure that, yeah, as Amy referred to, the data management, but just the ethics around how you think about and use that data is really founded on some strong frameworks and principles there.
Right. And Tim, last comment from you before I hand back to Clint to wrap up.
It's an add-on, not a replacement. So we genuinely use AI to improve workforce management and optimization, reporting and analytics, even communication to stakeholders and shareholders. But one thing it'll never replace is how to empower and motivate my team. So it'll help shape the conversation, but it won't be the conversation. So, yeah, it's great for data and analytics. The people side is for the leaders.
Thank you so much. Thanks for a fabulous conversation. I've really enjoyed listening to your contributions. Thank you, CEDA. And Clint, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks very